Hey, and welcome to another video. In this video I want to show you my favorite way on building social or auth in fastapi. On the first part I'm gonna walk you through what I created, and then I'm gonna jump into the code and show you how I built it. At first we got an endpoint that's gonna create in Google Redirect. I will call this on this window so you can see it. We are going to localhost auth and then Google or whichever auth provider you're gonna add, and this is gonna redirect us to the Google login screen. Now I can choose the account, and after that we are gonna get redirected to the backend application, and after the backend application we are gonna get redirected to the frontend with the granted access and refresh token. Alright. Now we're getting redirected, and we are on the frontend with the access and the refresh token, which will then be directed to a different URL, so those are removed from the URL on the front end. Alright. So now those are those two endpoints that are getting called. Now we can jump into the code. Here at first I'm setting the variables, so the client ID, the Google client secret, and the redirect UI, and the frontend URL. This is the Google login endpoint, or whichever provider you're gonna use in the end. My example is only Google, but you can add with the same logic you can add whatever endpoint you want. This is now an interesting part, the callback endpoint. I'm gonna check if the Google access token is a valid response, so if it's a valid user. If it's not, I'm gonna raise an HTTP exception and that it could not validate credentials. If it's valid, I'm gonna get the user info from the response, and this is just a pedantic transformation, so it's a Google transformation to Google user, and I'm going to check if the Google user is already existing with the sub provided by this response, and I'm going to store this in existing user, and if we have an existing user, I'm just going to store this into user, and if we not have an existing user, I'm going to create a user from the info we got from Google. I can open this quickly. Alright, I'm gonna get the Google sub and the Google email from the Google user. I'm gonna check again, because if I'm gonna call it somewhere else, I'm gonna check again if it's an existing user in the database with the email from Google. And if it's existing, I'm gonna add the Google ID to this account. And if it's not an existing user, I'm gonna just create it with the sub, the email, and the username. The username in this case is just the email from Google. And I'm gonna commit this into the database. Alright, after we created the user, or checked if it's an existing user, I'm gonna grant the access and the refresh token. I'm gonna create the access token with a validation of 7 days and the refresh token with 14 days. So you can use the refresh token to refresh the other tokens. After that, I'm gonna redirect to my frontend application with the access token and the refresh token, which I'm gonna replace in the URL, so it's not left in the URL on the frontend application. In addition to that, to the oauth and social auth, I'm also providing the user with the method password and username login. So I got just a basic endpoint. I'm gonna get the user data, the password, and the username. I'm gonna hash it and store it in the database. And I also got the get user endpoint. This is just so you can get the user data. And further, we can also create a token with the username and password. This is this endpoint. I'm going to authenticate the user, and if it's not, if I can't authenticate the user, it's an HTTP exception, unauthorized. And if I can auth the user, I'm going to grant access and refresh tokens in this case as well. Here's the endpoint for the refresh token. I'm going to check, so I'm going to get the refresh token provided, and I'm going to check if the token is expired. And if the token is not expired, I'm going to decode the token and get the user from the token. And I'm going to grant the access token with the user sub, the user ID, and again the time it should be valid, and the refresh token as well. And I'm going to provide this back to the user. And now I'll jump into the docs so I can show you how this works. At first, I'm going to create a user. I'm going to call it user, and the password should be user. I'm going to keep it simple. Alright. I created the user. Now I can grant a token for the user. User and user. Right. And now you can see I got granted the access token and the refresh token. Now I can also show you the refresh logic. Gonna copy that, close that, and go into the refresh. Right. I can provide a refresh token in here. I'm gonna execute that, and we are gonna get granted new tokens. Alright. I can also show you the get user data endpoint. I think, yeah, this should be it. I'm gonna log in with user and user authorize. Alright. And I can get the user data, try the endpoint, and I'm gonna get the user data. It doesn't have an email in this case because I authorized with username and password. If it's a Google account, I could also get the Google email right here. And that's that. So if you have any questions regarding this implementation, feel free to ask them in the comments. Is there something else I can add? Yeah, maybe I also created a user dependency, which I can further use to check if the user is authenticated. It should be under services, yes. I got a user dependency, it depends on the current user, which I'm gonna get here. I'm gonna try to get a user, and this is something I can inject a dependency to every endpoint I want to need the user to be authenticated, and then I can already access the user, like the user ID and user email in the endpoint. So feel free to ask questions, or if you need help to get this implemented, maybe I can share this repo if I don't forget it, and have fun implementing that. Or maybe if you have any tips or examples like this could be improved, also feel free to write them into the comments. So goodbye.